Thanks, everybody, for joining. Again, we greatly appreciate your support on this. My name is Tim McMullen. I head up the sales effort for Grooper and the marketing effort for Grooper. Today, we're going to be talking about transcript evaluation, and I'm going to let Logan handle that. I want to do a quick introduction to BIS because we have a lot of people on this webinar who aren't familiar with BIS and the Grooper product. So we've been in business for 40 years, since the late 80s, and we've been involved with higher education for at least 35 of those years. If you haven't heard of us, it's because we haven't made it rounds to your states. We've focused on the SACRO region the past several years, and we've hit the main SACRO events and a lot of these regional ACROs. I think we still got probably 10 or 12 of them left this year that we're going to hit. We're going to be branching out a little bit and going into some of the other states as well. So we're excited to have you all on with us. If you are involved with your local ACRO and you'd like to have Grooper come by and sponsor your event, please let us know. And you can find my information all over the website. I'm the unfortunate bot that pops up if you hit the website. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Logan Hill. Well, we do have your microphones muted. So if you do want to ask a question, we're watching the Q&A closely. So just go to the Q&A and answer your question, and then we'll get those answered as we go through. Thanks, everyone. Logan, take it away.
Thank you, Tim. So as Tim mentioned, I'm higher ed specialist here at BIS. I've made higher education my career, mostly because of my experience here. Started out, honestly, servicing our higher education clients and grew very fond of the people that I was working with and found that there was a lot more that we could do there. And so working with Tim, decided to make this full-time focus. In doing so, I uncovered that there was a lot more to transcript processing, which is what we're going to talk about today, than just collecting data off of a transcript. And early on in conversations, we were really focused on more on the registrar side, so to speak, to collect that information, help with course equivalencies and get that into the student information system. But during a couple of conversations, I realized we were missing an opportunity to help on the evaluating a student and verifying that they are able to meet acceptance requirements. And so I did a lot of thinking about that, dove into Grooper personally, and created what I'm going to be demoing today around. This one particular will be around college transcripts through the admission process. I did a high school one, a while back. If you're interested in seeing that, just reach out to Tim or I, and we'll be sure to either do it live for you or get you the recording. That being said, let me share my screen and we'll get started. Make sure I share the right screen here.
And again, for those just joining, if you do have questions, use the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom session, and we'll get those handled.
Yeah, Tim, if you don't mind, since I can't really see it, if you watch that for me. Okay, so can you see my screen now? Perfect. Okay, so what you're seeing here, this is what's called the Grooper batches page. Think of it as the Grooper dashboard that end users would kind of have their queue. There's a lot of things that we can do with this dashboard to kind of filter certain processes or certain steps within a process that you'll see here shortly. But just want to focus more on that on maybe a different conversation. But just kind of wanted to put that out there that we have the ability to adjust this to the person that will be processing to kind of build the queue to fit them. So as you notice here, we've got 0 batches in here. So nothing is in here just yet. This kind of helps you track the progress of a batch. Just to point out a couple cool features, you'll see this is in dark mode. That's what I typically use, but we make it very easy to switch to a light mode. I'm going to flip that back real quick. And there's some couple, feature things that I'll try to cover as I go through here, since I know several of you are not familiar with Grooper. So when we're talking about creating a batch, we can do this a couple different ways. We can do this automatically, where let's say we watch an email or we're watching a folder somewhere on either your machine or somewhere on the network, and we can pull in those documents automatically. We can actually pull from, like, for instance, if you're a Slate school, Slate SFTP, we can pull from like a SoftDocs or an app extender, OnBase, et cetera. We can pull from other systems. Or we give you the ability to manually create a batch. For this demo, I'm actually going to manually create one, just because, for one, it's a little bit easier to explain and kind of walk through some of the steps with you. So I'm going to create a new batch here. Oh, might help if I refresh the page. It sat too long. So I'm going to manually create a batch here. And one thing to point out is with creating a new batch, if you do it manually, it'll actually give you the option to pick whichever process that you want here. You can name it however. I think the default is the date and time. If you do it automatically, you have a little bit more control over naming these if you wanted to do that a certain way. So for instance, we're just going to call this one, college admissions webinar. Okay. So now you can see when I click on here, we've got this first batch here. And the first step is add transcripts. So you can see that right here. I'm just going to double click this and open this up. And for this particular one, I'm just going to simply drag and drop a couple. Let me drag this over here so you can see it. I'm going to select these two college transcripts, and I'm just going to drag and drop them in. We can do one, I think the limit's like 2,500 or something like that you can have within a batch before you have to create a new one. So we keep it very flexible. You can do it one, you can do it many. And just to kind of show you what these look like, you've got one here. That one is for Randall University. And right now, this is just a PDF document that I've dropped in here, a couple pages you can see here with course data. And then this other one is a 2-page transcript for Oklahoma City Community College. So that looks good. I'm going to complete that task. And what you're going to see happen here is it's going to kick off the process. So this is, basically behind the scenes, Grooper's processing this. So the first thing we're going to do is identify how many pages were in each one of those documents. The next thing we're going to do is read that text, run it through OCR, make it machine readable is the way I like to phrase that. Because once it's machine readable, at that point, that's where we can really get into the weeds and get really creative with identifying what kind of document or maybe what school the document is from. We can then, collect certain information when we understand what kind of document that is. We can apply business rules to specific documents. So it really all starts with making that document machine readable. So while this is processing, I'm going to actually show you one other quick way that you can add some documents in here. So I'm going to create a second batch here. So I dragged those ones in here and just dropped them in. But we also can connect this to a scanner. So if you get these physical, transcripts that are still getting mailed in, I know it's most people are using like, Parchment or Clearinghouse or something like that. That's the most common way, but there's still a lot of physical ones that are being mailed. So with this, we can actually connect to a scanner, and I've got this set up to do so. Or when I click this, you can see here, it actually just scanned in those documents that we just saw. So I actually already brought this in for the other batch. So I'm just going to stop this one, but I just wanted to show you another possibility of being able to use a scanner to process a transcript or get that first step of getting that document and that data into Grooper. So let me stop this here, and this one is working. So as I mentioned, it's going through this process, and the first step we're going to do after making it machine readable is we're going to identify what document. So in this case, what we're doing is we're actually identifying it as a transcript. We're not doing this, in a traditional fashion with templates where, you have one per school and you got to set up your zones and, all of that kind of, historical way of doing things. We're not having to do that with this one. So we're just identifying that this is a college transcript. Once that happens, it goes into the next step here, collect information. This is where we're going to go extract all of the data from the document. We're actually going to do some other cool things that'll show you looking up information, populating information, doing some calculations, and also verifying some of that data as well. So you can see here of the two transcripts, one's already done. It's working on the other one. Machine's running a little bit slow this morning, so I apologize. I'm waiting on that. I'm actually going to take a drink so I don't get dry mouth. All right, let's give it a couple more seconds here.
The fun of a live demo.
Yes. Well, while that's still processing, I can show you something else that's pretty cool. So as I mentioned, being able to kind of filter things out on this dashboard, notice this blue icon. So the reason that is blue right now is because I actually have it set up to only look at batches that are a part of this particular process that we're doing today. If I was to click on here, I can actually pick multiple. If I just remove that one, then it defaults to showing me all of them. So we can do it that way. We can, as I mentioned, do individual steps where if you only want one person, scanning transcripts in or, adding documents, you can actually get really, really specific on this specific step per user. Cancel that. Looks like we are ready to review this information. So I'm just going to double click here. And this is going to be the, I call it the evaluation UI, where you're actually reviewing the information. So looking at this transcript here, this one from Randall University, you'll notice that this student ID right here that we've collected in this first section of student information, that is actually not on this document. The student ID is very different. Reason being is we're actually doing a lookup for this field where we're taking the last name and the date of birth, or the last name and the last four of the social, and we're actually doing a lookup to populate that student ID. So that way, that student ID, being used all across campus, is tied to this document. So when it goes to be, exported out into, let's say, a content management system, or exporting data to a Slate or an SIS or something along those lines, that student ID can be used to find the correct student and make sure it gets tied to the correct record. Also collecting, name information here. This is a really cool feature that we have that we don't honestly talk a lot about, but I do because I like it. So this date of birth, you'll notice you can't see that, but as soon as I click it and click in the field, you can see where that date of birth is. And as soon as I click off, it goes back. That's to help with, accidental disclosures and just really making sure, PPI and all that kind of stuff is protected. So we can get basic student information, but moving on to transcript information, we can see here that Randall University is the school. There is a awarded degree of Bachelor of Science. You can actually see here in green where we found that information. We can also see the award date, and we're also pulling in the cumulative GPA and also credit hours. So if you look down at this, you'll notice this acceptance status is accepted. That's because I've put in criteria that has to be met in order for this student to be accepted. Now, it could be set up and configured however you want it to be. We can have it set up where they go in a specific order. We can have it set up to where they have to meet all of them or maybe some of them. We can be very, very flexible here. And so if it doesn't look, quite how your institution processes, that's not a problem. We can adapt to that. That's one of the things that we specialize in, is making sure we tailor it exactly to your needs. So the first criteria that we're looking for is, does the student have a history of academic probation or suspension? And I put this in here. I imagine you guys probably know your acceptance requirements pretty well. But for somebody maybe that's new, or somebody that's coming in here that's maybe your training or something like that, this is a non-editable field, so it just kind of gives them some instruction and a way to verify that information. So looking over this, it's gone and looked, said no, there's no history of probation or suspension. So therefore, this criteria is actually met. And then if you move on to this one, a lot of institutions that I've worked with have if it's 23 credit hours or less, they're still required to provide a high school transcript. And so we're looking at the number of attempted credit hours. And in this case, it's 120. So therefore, a high school transcript is not required. And then moving on to the next one, does the student meet GPA requirements? And this is one where this can be dynamic based on your campus policies or acceptance requirements, where if it's, in some cases, if you're below 59 credit hours, you will be required to have, like in this case, a 2.25 GPA. But if you're 60 credit hours attempted or higher, then you only have to have a 2.0. And so the way that works is we're actually doing that calculation behind the scenes for you. I can't tell you how many institutions that I've talked to that are still doing part of this process manually with pen and paper and a calculator, which is very, very time consuming. And part of the reason why I built this is because we have the tools to do this kind of work for you and kind of give you a guide. So the cool part about this is we still give you the ability to kind of put your hands on it and adjust it where needed. You can make adjustments for exceptions or things like that. So one of the things I want to point out here is, keep in mind, right now we're at 120 credit hours and a 2.18 GPA. But looking at that's based on this information that you see here, the course data that we've collected. So I can set up automatic rules where it says, filter out classes that they withdrew from, pass fail courses, maybe retakes or something along those lines. So looking at this, you can see here that this one's a withdrawal. There's, men's soccer is something that's not needed for GPA, and there's a retake down here. So as I mentioned, we can, automate that filtering, but we can also give you the ability to run those rules. So what I'm going to do is look at this one and say, let's remove courses with a W grade. And I'm going to click apply. So when that rule just ran, the GPA is now updated, the credit hours have been updated, and that course is now gone. So let's look a little further down. Oh, we have a retake here. Let's run that rule. And yes, you can stack rules to be run simultaneously, but I wanted to kind of walk you through the process. So let's say remove ones that have been retaken. Apply, and notice now credit hours went down a little bit, GPA went up because you've removed those. So now kind of looking through here, everything else looks good. We can see here that all of the criteria has been met. So therefore, the student would be considered accepted. And then kind of pulling through here. So one thing to point out is this transcript is 4 pages. So when I'm clicking through here and click on a course, it'll actually track in green. And as I tab through here, it'll actually follow along with it on the image. So you can see exactly where it found that information. But what's really cool is as I go through here and look at these courses, when I get to the next one, it'll automatically go to the second page for me. Now, we can create, one big table here that has all of the courses if that's easier for you. But if you truly want it to be broken down by semester, that is something that we can also do. I just wanted to make that distinction. So looking through here, we've got all our courses, and I also have this information here because it's been my experience that this is actually a beneficial tool here, that this information is locked where you can't edit it. So because I'm the person that opened this transcript and am processing it, evaluating it, it knows that I am the one that opened it. It knows the date and time, and I can't edit that. But what's really cool is we have the ability to add comments. So I can say something like, Logan meets all criteria, and this information can be passed along to the system of record, or it could be applied as an annotation on the actual transcript. So anytime you go back and review this transcript, the physical one, you'll have that annotation on it. So it's really your preference. This isn't something that's obviously needed, but it's a cool feature that I felt like was worth mentioning and giving you a way to go back and kind of audit some of this information. So everything looks good on this one. I'm going to save this one, but we still have that second transcript that we brought in. So
Logan, as
yes.
You've got a couple of questions. So as you come to that second transcript, somebody had asked about doing a single GPA for multiple transcripts across multiple transcripts. And I don't think we have that set up, do we?
Not in this demo. I've done it before in a personalized demo for a school. So it's something that I can absolutely show you if you want to see it. But essentially the way just high level, the way it works is, for instance, like this one is for, they're both my transcripts. So what we do is you process them individually. And then what we do is we actually keep those 2 documents within Grooper. And then we have a way of combining the data that you just verified. So you verify, make sure all the data is good in this evaluation standpoint. And then you take the 2, and we have a way of kind of combining that data to give you a summary of the 2.
Yep. Okay. And then we also had a question about your favorite subject, international transcripts. So, and can we do this on international? And I had already answered that. Yeah, we absolutely can. The rules are much more complex, and the accreditation is the big challenge that we face. Obviously, trying to automate that, but pulling off of the data is actually that's actually what we do. I mean, this is what we're experts at, is pulling off data from different documents, even if they happen to be, completely different formats that we've never seen again. So, and we're actually working on one of those actively now.
Thanks for that, Tim. So looking at this transcript, the first question is actually a very good point. So let me back up just real quick. One of the things that we can do, it's not necessarily part of this demo too, is under this transcript information, we can actually add a couple of fields to identify if there's transfer credit and where. So I've got that on a personal one that I did a while back, but basically we can identify that, yes, this transcript does have transfer credit. This student went to Oklahoma City Community College, and then use that information to maybe update a checklist inside of Slate or Recruiter, whatever CRM or SIS that you're using, and that information needs to go to. We can collect that information to bring to the reviewer's attention and make them aware that that student needs to provide it. If you're keeping track of these inside of another solution, we can even look it up to see if that document has been added. And that one's, you have to have certain rules set up within your other systems, but it's definitely something that we could do. So let me toggle back over here. So that Oklahoma City Community College, here's that transcript, very similar to the other one, collecting all of the student header information. We also have collected the school information. In this case, no degree was earned. There's no degree that was awarded. Excuse me. Cumulative GPA is being calculated. The attempted credit hours being calculated. So in this case, the student has been denied. And if you look down here, they actually meet the history of probation suspension. So there's no issues there. They don't need to provide a high school transcript because they're over that 23 credit hour threshold. But here's where they're failing. They're not meeting GPA requirements. And you can see that here. Criteria is not met. Credit hours are being pulled in here, but the admission GPA is too low. So this is where, as you saw in the other one, those rules that I was running, whether they're automated or manual, this is where it makes a difference because everything that is happening here is dynamic. So as you make those changes, all of this data gets updated correctly. So looking at this one here, you can see really quickly, oh, there is a withdrawal that has been collected with this one. I need to remove that. So pay attention here to this GPA, credit hours, and criteria status. So when I run this rule and I say remove courses with the W grade, and we can name these whatever, and you can have as many as you want. So let me click apply here. Now, if you notice, student status is accepted. So that has now been updated. The admission GPA is updated. Credit hours have been updated from 33 to 30, and that criteria status is now met. So one thing to point out too, with these calculations is notice there's no points over here in this column. So when I click on this one and I go to the next one, look at the credits, the grade, it is calculating those points. So for instance, if I was to look at this one, let's make it an A. That automatically gets updated. Now, what's really cool is that's dynamic. So we can set whatever point calculations. If you need to convert from a different grading scale, like maybe it's like a quarterly, or maybe it's in International's case where they use a different grading scale and needs to be converted over to your institutions, that's something that we can do. We can do it behind the scenes. We can actually do it with fields here where we have default values that give you the ability to make adjustments that way. Again, we're very flexible, and the whole idea is to tailor the solution around how you process transcripts and just basically make your process easier. So updating that, got a tab over, that goes back to 6 here, and collecting all of that information, looking down here at this processing information, we have, again, date, comment, student meets requirements, and I can save that. And once that's good, I can complete that task, and it will actually now export out. So let me stop there. I talked a bunch. Questions?
Yeah, we've been answering as we go. We just had one about Slate integration and the batches, when are they available? And I was just answering that. Obviously, you have experience with Slate. When you ask the question, how fast is it going to be till it's available in Slate? In our experience, and because we're on a lowly vendor instance, there's a delay, right? We dump them off to Slate, and there's a delay for when they get imported. That really depends on how your Slate install is set up. I don't know if were we ever able to get a solid answer out of Technolutions about that, about whether we can do a live integration or not, or is there always a delay?
It's a 15-minute wait. There's a 15-minute loop that happens. Now that doesn't mean you can't get it in quicker. It just requires a manual pickup and
upload,
import.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we can, and we have several different ways to get data over to Slate. What we found, the easiest one is we just use Slate's built-in FTP or SFTP, and we put it to that. And then once that's sitting there, somebody can go in and integrate that if they want it before that, or fire off that import if they want it before the 15-minute interval. So, which is what we were doing around here because we didn't want to wait.
Yeah, and if Tim didn't mention, we are a Slate preferred partner, just so that's aware too.
I did not mention that. Yeah, we've got Rotelli University up live here, so that's Dan Rotelli's our owner. So we've been playing around with a lot of fun in that. So there will be more coming with that as we get our Slate skills more mature, in our environment more mature. You know, our challenge with that is we didn't really have anything that accurately represented a real school set up until now. So Logan, we got a couple minutes left. Let's see what processes are involved in validating international and high schools. Okay, so let's talk through that. So typically, the challenge with high school, anything international really, is not the data pull. The pulling of data this day and age, especially because most of the transcripts that are coming over are in English that we've seen. Even if they're not in English, we can even do that. The AI translation has become phenomenal, but everything we've been playing with recently has all been in English, right? Right, Logan? We haven't seen anything in other languages.
Yes, some of the international ones have been in Spanish, and we're able to convert that to English. No
Spanish
problem.
is easy. It's the ones that are tougher, in India and China or things like that. So generally, single byte languages are easy to translate. That's a long technical story I don't want to talk about. But Getting the data off is the easy part. It's how you do your validation. So we're working with somebody right now, and the validation they use is they literally have to go up and find the school on a login from a website, and we're looking into if we can help that along. But as soon as somebody protects that something behind a website, it's really tough to automate that, because what happens is ultimately you get it automated, and the vendor changes something. They do an update to their look and feel of the website. They break the integration. So that can be a challenge. There's really the process is really the same as what Logan showed. What you're seeing different there is you're doing a lot more translation between your credits, because the grading systems are different, and your degrees, because the degrees are not one-to-one, right? It's not high school. They've got a different system for it. So you got to be able to make that translation. And from what I can tell, it's country by country. But that's really the whole point of Grooper, is to make it very easy to handle much more disparate system types of documents. So the more varied they are, actually, we end up doing better, as opposed to if it's always the same. That's easy. Anybody can do it. I hope I answered that. So we have also somebody, Logan, that has transcripts coming into Slate. Would the general process be for those are pulled into Grooper and then review the notes and then import back into Slate in the map fields? And I can take that one if you want. Yeah, definitely. That would be the process. We need to bring those documents into Grooper to do the OCR, to do the extraction. And then once we pull off all the data and get it where we want it to be and in the format we want, then we can put it back, and it will, with those, as long as we pull off that document ID, we should be able to store it right back where it goes. Slate will know where to put it when we put it back, right? And Logan, call me out if I'm not.
Yep. No, you are correct. We can pull that document in. We can do the process. We can verify the information. We can go put it back. As far as like would that be the process? Absolutely, it can be. Doesn't have to be. It's really up to you.
Yeah, and then we have somebody. How does, again, same question is, how does document get into Grooper? So we have a couple different ways. If you're putting them into Slate first, we will pull them out of Slate and pull them in the Grooper, and then give you back the data with those documents. And then the notes, yes, the notes can go from Grooper directly into Slate. We can, and we know your Slate system is custom. I mean, if that's been the challenge, is we went into this a year ago thinking that there would be one easy way to get into Slate, and it is easy. It's just everybody sets up different fields. So as part of this is we map fields in Grooper to their equivalents in Slate, whatever those are for your systems. And then, yeah, you saw the pricing one, Logan. So to answer pricing, I mean, pricing is, we've got a couple different pricing models. We're just about to launch and announce a hosted solution. So where we do all this for you, and you just pay us a price, and we set it up for you, and you take care of that. We also have the rest of our pricing models are based on your annual volume, which in this case, if you're just doing it with transcripts, it's pretty low. So, and we're actually adjusting our pricing for the higher ed market right now. So where you're looking at roughly around, what did we say, roughly around $1,000 a month for the different solutions. Now, where the real value is around this is, if you've been following our webinars, this one is on admissions, but we also did one on recruitment. We were also doing one on we have a couple on the phone here of registrars. So and then we also have a call tomorrow about financial aid. So as you deploy these across multiple departments, that's where your investment in Grooper makes even more sense. And we'd probably look at more of a traditional, cheaper pricing model for you than trying to go department by department. So we're very flexible on the pricing. We're independently owned. This is our product. We're not beholden to anybody. I don't have a board of directors that has external influence that I have to worry about. So that gives us a lot of flexibility to work with you in your specific situation. So let me see if I managed. I think I got. Yeah, we had several people asking about the same question. We get transcripts into Slate. So Logan, you got your next webinar you need to do, is we need to pull them from Slate and do this basically the same demo. So yeah, absolutely. And I hope I answered the questions around international. If anybody, if you still have time, and we normally would bring the call down, but if you have time, ask us another question, and we'll happily stay on here for another couple of minutes, but I want to be respectful of everybody else's time. You will get the recording to this live session. We always send those out the next day as soon as Colin here gets it handled. Without that, if we don't have any other questions, I'll wait a couple seconds. Logan, did you have anything else we wanted to add?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add was, for the couple questions around high school and international, if you want to have a conversation around that and kind of understand it a little bit better, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to do that. We also, I think, still have the webinar link from a couple weeks ago that we did on high school transcripts.
We do.
So you should be able to go.
We have not done one on international yet because it doesn't seem to, everybody's situation seems so unique. Yes, and it's absolutely possible to schedule demos with us live and give us your samples and we'll show you what you can do. We can't build the full solution right there, but we'll get you the idea. You'll see exactly what we're doing. We can show you the differences and how we'd have to tweak things to get it to work. One of our favorite things to do is send us your documents on the call and we'll walk you through and we'll show you how the sausage is made. I mean, that's the whole key here is this is not a black box. It is very complex technology, but we know how to do this really well, and we will show you exactly how to do what we do. I mean, that's what we do. Does it push the decision through to Slate as well? So yeah, I think we would push the decision as long as you have a way for that decision, somewhere for that decision to land, right? So I'm assuming it's usually a toggle box, right? A toggle field between accepted. It's probably a couple. It's probably applied, accepted, denied, right? Something like that. So as long as there's a field for us to trigger, we can set that field. Absolutely.
Yeah. Real quick, and to expand on that question about pushing that decision, the other thing that we have the ability to do is push information to update that checklist. So if you have checklists set up in your Slate environment, maybe requirements of documents they have to provide or something along those lines, we can go update the checklist to verify it's been checked in or it has been processed or et cetera.
That was a checklist. That's what I meant to say. Thanks. So yeah, and I see people asking about if we're able to do this live, if we'd be able to talk to you about this situation or that situation. Absolutely. Reach out to us. You'll get our follow-up email. You have my email from my emails, so feel free to reach out. We will happily schedule some time with you to go over your specific situation. I greatly appreciate all the interaction. Thank you so much. There's nothing like doing one of these and nobody asks questions. So this is probably the biggest reason we stay in higher ed, right, Logan, is this we love working with y'all so much. So thanks very much for your time today. We look forward to speaking with y'all. Take care.